Well, hello everybody. A very warm welcome along to Sportsbet TV and our racing tips. This is Paul Alster with you once again. First and foremost, wishing you a very happy new year 2021. Here's hoping this is going to be a far better year for us all than 2020, which was incredibly challenging on so many fronts. Let's not go into it all. We all know what we're talking about. But as far as racing goes, it certainly hasn't been an easy year. We started this service in mid to late summer, and I'm delighted to say that we're showing a very good profit, in particular over the last 3 months. And for those of you that might be joining us for the first time, and I did notice that there was a significant increase in the number of viewers for our most recent bulletin, and I'm glad you were able to join us. This service isn't about putting up horses that are obvious, really. For the most part, we're looking for horses to bet each way, and very often at double figure odds, which means that statistically you're going to be selecting far less winners than those that might be putting up short price favourites and the one that's the paper favourite. We can all do that. It's not hard to pick a favourite. But what is hard to do is to find horses that are available at decent odds. And in recent weeks and months we've done that time and time again. And I know regular followers, and I must say to those of you that have left comments, thank you very much for all the very encouraging words. Even one or two digs there, I don't mind that here and there. The guy that said, you mentioned the 66 to 1 winner you had again from just a few weeks ago. How long are you going to live off that? Well, at 3 tips a week, I'd make that 22 weeks. But I'm not going to mention it each and every one. What I will say is that we've had a number of very good double-figure priced winners, and we'll continue to keep looking out for the value and turning the form book upside down to try and bring you some great winners in 2021. Just before I come to the selections and such, I want to remind you that if you haven't already done so, please press the red subscribe button just below this screen and the bell symbol, which will make sure that you get a notice every time we post a new bulletin. Well, I have 4 selections for you across New Year's Day and on to Saturday, of course, Cheltenham having been abandoned. But just before I go there, a quick word about the selections we gave you on Boxing Day. And of course for the day after, the horse that was scheduled of course to run in the Welsh National, that meeting was abandoned. We suggested Joe Farrell at 40 to 1 there. We'll be looking again at the Welsh National in our bulletin next weekend, and we'll be reconsidering the form and those that are set to face the starter. The other 3, well, I went against my normal rules of play and I decided to go for one at win odds in the King George, and I went with Surname, who I thought would run very well. Now he didn't. He ran a very disappointing race for whatever reason, but horses are animals, they're creatures that have good days and bad days like everybody else, and he certainly had a bad day. And I was kicking myself really because I had been very seriously considering putting up Waiting Patiently each way. I didn't do that. Just a little anxious about him getting the 3 miles first time in a Grade 1. But he ran an absolute blinder. But all credit to Surname and Bryony Frost, who, as I said, would lead them. I said he might hold on for a place. Well, he did more than that. He ran them into the ground. And it was just a breathtaking performance. No fluke about it in my book. And as he goes better at Cheltenham than anywhere else, he's likely to put up a very bold show in the Gold Cup. And it could be a historic moment if Bryony Frost does boot him home in front. So that was a disappointment. The other 2 on Boxing Day, well, first of all, the good news was Look My Way, who I tipped you at 18 to 1 in the handicap hurdle at Wetherby for John Quinn. He ran a great race. He was the only one to give a race to the hot 6 to 4 favourite Mint Condition. The pair of them came clear, and I did think going to the last he might just get there, but he couldn't quite get by. And he ran a very honourable second place, so I hope you were on at 18 to 1 each way there. That was Look My Way. Now the other horse was Distingo of Gary Moore's. Now this horse was in a very mulish mood, it turned out, and we put him up at 16 to 1 in a red-hot handicap hurdle, and he was at the back of the field all the way. And if ever a jockey deserves plaudits for a losing ride, then it's Jamie Moore, because he was riding this horse non-stop all the way through, and I was astonished, having given up on him, to see him creeping into it off the home turn, and indeed he was only 2 lengths off the lead at the second last. He couldn't quite sustain it, but it was a hell of a ride from Moore. A never say die ride. He would just not give in. I'm sure he knew the owners were probably on each way, and he did his very best to try and get the horse home. It didn't quite work on that occasion, but I suspect there will be a race for him at some point this term. Now, I'm going to move on to our selections for New Year's Day, and of course such a shame that Cheltenham has been abandoned. It's not uncommon, of course, at this time of year, but we're looking at horses on New Year's Day at Exeter and Musselburgh, and I'm going to start off with a big price one, hopefully to give us something to cheer about very early on New Year's Day, whether or not you've got a hangover. And it's in the very first race at Exeter, the 12:30, which is a 2-mile, 1 furlong novices hurdle. Now, this is a race run on heavy ground. Orby's Legend won over the course and distance recently, 4 weeks ago, so he is the horse that sets the standard, and he is penalised for that in this novices hurdle. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of money for Art Approval, who was second at both Market Raisin and Cheltenham, and he looks set to run well. Grandee, many of you may know him as a horse that's been very useful on the flat, but so far he hasn't really taken to it over hurdles. And there's a horse of Paul Nicholls that hasn't looked very good so far, a horse called Etoile Rebelle. He could easily improve, but I won't be rushing to back him. And Harry Fry runs a couple, both who have a squeak, called Imperial Esprit and Rebels Hill, who for me looks the better of the two. But I'm putting one up at what is likely to be quite a big price. We don't have any odds with it being a novices hurdle at the time of this recording on lunchtime, New Year's Eve. But the horse in question is trained by Colin Tizard and is the mount of Harry Cobden, and he's called the Widow Maker. Not quite sure what's behind the naming of this horse, but I'm sure there's a story there. He's by a sire called Arvico, and he's quite well related to a bumper winner, a hurdles winner, a chase winner, including Earl's Kitchen, who won the Devon National at Exeter over 3 3/4 miles. So there's every reason to believe that in time he's going to stay further than the trip on New Year's Day. Now, he's had 2 runs, this horse. He was 9th of 16 on his debut, which came at Exeter in early December in a bumper. That was in December of last year. And then he's come back this year after a 364-day absence, and he ran in the race behind Orby's Legend. Now, I've watched this tape a few times, and what happened in this race is that he was ridden by a conditional jockey called Harry Kimber, and the poor lad felt his saddle slipping very early on, and the horse pulled his way forward and raced prominently throughout. Now, anybody that's ever ridden a horse where the saddle isn't in place, it's quite a frightening experience, even if there is soft ground to fall onto. But Kimber managed to stay on board, and remarkably, he was still bang there at the third last, when as they jumped the third last, you could see the saddle slip to the side, and he spent the next 2 furlongs and the second last flight trying to get his balance back and bring the saddle onto the horse. So he wasn't riding the horse in any way, shape or form. The others got away from him. Somehow he managed to get over the last. But I'm absolutely convinced that if he'd been able to ride a finish on the horse, he would have got rather close to the eventual winner. Now, the bare form says that he was beaten 20 lengths and that he finished 7th of the 15, but he is far better than the bare form. And I think he's going to run really well, assuming the saddle is fitted properly this time. And this time, Harry Cobden takes over from the conditional. So at a track where the stable does well, a horse who can clearly handle soft ground, I think he's valued £7 better with the favourite, and I'm expecting him to be around the 16 to 20 to 1 mark. I see that both the Racing Post and Sporting Life have forecast him at 25 to 1, and I wouldn't mind a little bit of that each way if it's available. So that is the Widow Maker in the very first race at Exeter on New Year's Day at 12:30. Around 20 to 1, 25 to 1 even each way would be lovely. So that's the first. Now let's move on to our second selection. And this one goes at Musselburgh, a place I've raced at many times and worked at and commentated at. Now the 120 race at Musselburgh is a 2.5 mile handicap hurdle. Accomplice for Paul Nicholls, is an interesting horse. We've got Newburn Bay for Keith Dalgleish, who's another interesting runner. Elf de Ray for Sandy Thompson, and Clarence for Ian Jardine. But a horse I've already tipped 3 times this season runs here. His name is Sebastopol. He's trained by Tom Lacey and is the mount of Jonathan Burke. Now, the first 2 occasions I tipped him, he didn't run because the ground was too soft. And then they eventually did run him at Newbury in a listed race where he shaped very, very well over 2 miles until just blowing up on his first start for a long time as they went down towards the final flight. Now, it's been picked up by a number of form watchers that he did travel well that day. And it's interesting here that he goes up to 2.5 miles for the first time, and he returns to Musselburgh, which was the scene of his win last February when he won the Scottish County Hurdle. This is a horse who on decent ground with just a bit of give is very, very useful, and I think he's going to stay the extra half mile, and I think that's what Connections are looking at. Normally at Musselburgh they don't get bad ground. It's right there by the sea. There's always a proper breeze to dry out any rain that has fallen. And I think Sebastopol, who's available at 5-1 each way in general, is worth a try. And he's going to run a big race in the 120 at Musselburgh for Connections, Tom Lacey and the very useful jockey Jonathan Burke. And then our third selection on New Year's Day, well, this is at Exeter once again, the 250. It's a race shown on ITV, as is the 120. And this is a 3-mile handicap chase. And there are lots of horses that you can make a case for in this one. We've got the dead 8 runners, so I hope none of them are absentees, because each way we're looking for 3 places. Harry Fry has asked me early. Now, he won very impressively at Chepstow. And to be honest, he could be a step or 2 ahead of the handicapper, but I'm not sure he's going to be any value. There are a number of other horses that should go well, but the one I like here is called Hold That Taut. Hold That Taut. He's trained by Venetia Williams and is the mount of Charlie Deutsch. Now, Venetia's Williams have been running pretty well of late, and as we know, many of her horses really go well in the mud. And this horse won at Lingfield over hurdles over 2 miles in heavy ground in November of 2019, and on his reappearance run this season back at Lingfield over 2 miles 7 and first time out over fences, he was only beaten half a length, and he ran in a handicap first time over fences off 119. That was a tremendous effort first time out. And they stepped him up in grade and sent him to Ascot last time out over 3 miles. Again, on soft ground he ran well, eventually finishing third to a horse called De Machine, who you may have seen run well when third in a pretty hot handicap at Newbury just after Christmas. So the form does look rock solid. I think this horse is definitely going the right way. He's running off his mark of 123, the same as at Ascot, and I think this track is likely to suit him better. And with Venetia having a 16% strike rate at the track, the 5-1 that is available each way at the time of this recording with Bet365, to me, looks value, and I'll be backing Hold That Taut at Exeter in the 250 each way on New Year's Day. Now, I just want to offer you one horse for Saturday, the 2nd of January, and this is going to be a really interesting race for you without a doubt, because it's at Sandown. It's Tolworth Hurdle Day at Sandown. The going is expected to be very, very deep, and there's a fascinating race at 3 o'clock with £70,000 in prize money. It is the Unibet Veterans Handicap Chase, and at the time of this recording they're betting 7-1 the field, so it is wide open with 17 runners. They could well bet each way, many of the firms 5 places. It wouldn't surprise me if 1 or 2 go 6. And remember, for all these bets I'm suggesting, if you do take a price, make sure it's with a bookmaker that will pay you the SP if that turns out to be bigger. Now, there are loads of old favourites in this race, some of them up to 14 years old. But the horse I'm going to tip you here is one that I've got a very soft spot for. His name is See You at Midnight. He's trained by our man Sandy Thompson, who sent out York Hill to win at huge odds for us in the rehearsal chase. And once again, Ryan Mania is expected to ride. Now, See You at Midnight is trained by Sandy Thompson in the Border Country. And I checked on the travel checker how long it takes on a normal day to go from his stables, which are not far from Kelso, all the way down to Sandown. And the answer is about 6 hours 37 minutes is the journey. And that's on a good day with good weather. As we know, there's snow about, rain. It's going to be at least a 7.5 hour journey each way. And Sandy Thompson is sending this horse down. So you have to think that they're expecting him to run well. Now, he's been a great servant. He was a Grade 2 winner of the Dipper Novice Chase in his time. He's also done very well, third in the 2016 Scottish National. Do you remember him beating Bristol de Mai by 12 lengths at Carlisle off level weights back in the day? And I have to admit, I had some proper money on him for the 2018 Grand National won by Tiger Roll. And if you watch the video of that Grand National, he was right there after the third last. He was in second place, chasing Pleasant Company, going well, and then all of a sudden he started to drop back. I thought it was a surprise that he didn't stay. It turned out he'd gone lame. He eventually did finish the course, surprisingly, but he went lame. I'm sure he would have been in the frame if he'd stayed sound, because this is a horse who stays well, and he put up a great performance for so far there. Now, the thing about the horse, he's only run 3 times in very nearly 3 years since then. He was off for 2 years, he had his issues, and then he ran a modest race on his first comeback race last year before he popped up and won at Carlisle. So the old fires are still burning. Now, once again, horses as they get older, they do take a little bit more getting fit, and Connections had to wait until Haydock in early December to send him for a pretty tough race, where he again travelled well until he absolutely clobbered the 6th from home, and he was pulled up almost immediately after that when all chance had gone. Now, I want to read you something here. I don't normally do this, but sometimes horses are plotted for a particular race, we know that, and it doesn't always work out. But when you've got a trainer as shrewd as Sandy Thompson, I think it's worth listening to. And the Sporting Live did a stable tour. Mark Howard, who's a very good journalist, and you may know him as a tipster from Racing TV, he went to see Sandy Thompson. And this was in the late summer. And he said a few things about the horse. He said that last season they were planning to aim him at the Scottish National, but of course the season was cut short and the race was never run. And this is what he said in the late summer, early autumn. He said, he's in good order at home, but I don't know whether he's going to be ready in time for a veterans chase at Aintree on the 25th of October. Well, as it turned out, he wasn't ready, and we didn't see him until he ran in that race at Haydock a few weeks ago. But Sandy Thompson finishes by saying this: the final at Sandown earlier in the new year is likely to be his main target this season. And that's the race he's running in on Saturday. They've been planning to get this horse to a peak for the 2nd of January at Sandown. He's still fairly handicapped on his old form. And I think that at 20 to 1, generally each way, I'm sure some will go 25 to 1. I'm sure it'll be 25 to 1 in places. If you can get 5 or even 6 places, I think my old pal See You at Midnight for Sandy Thompson and Ryan Mania is set to run a very big race at Sandown on Saturday at 3 o'clock in that tremendous veterans chase. So there we have it. It's been a long bulletin, but I hope you've found the points I've made of interest and you've made note of the 4 runners. I wish you health, wealth and prosperity in 2021. Remember to subscribe, remember to share this video, and remember to come back next weekend. Well, I'll have more selections for you, but until then, from me, Paul Alster, enjoy your racing, and once again, Happy New Year.